You're listening to the Wired for Impact podcast.
Let's shift gears a little bit into your candidacy. What are you primarily running on? Why is a Rectenwald ticket the one that people should be voting for?
Well, the idea of my campaign is not like, if I were elected, I'll go in and fix everything. That's not going to happen, and that's not how things will get fixed. The idea is not even fixing things. The idea is to take the power that is vested in this giant, unbelievably mammoth-like central government and to get it away from the central government and allow freedom at the local level. So it's a campaign based on localism and decentralization, wresting power from these. The closer governance is to the people, the less oppressive and exploitative it is. The further away it is, the more exploitative and oppressive. So when people are closer to their governance system, whatever it might be, they have more impact on it. I think the idea is eventually there'd be no structural state as such. There'd always be governance. But governance by virtue of people in a cooperative society, exchanging goods, making production exchange and recognizing the rights of others. And that's a system. There'll always be deviants, of course. There always will. There's going to be deviants out there. And this libertarian society deals with them in a way. But it doesn't set up a whole infrastructure to incarcerate all these people that, the state likes to keep in its prisons. But I think that, getting rid of arbitrary laws, getting rid of all this, basically increasing the scope of liberty, the breadth and the expanse of liberty in individuals' lives. That's what I'm running on.
You're one of the few candidates that talk specifically about, in my mind, drilling down to the root of a lot of the malfeasance that's been pushed out into our culture and our society today comes from the economic structure that we're under. And you're one of the few candidates that I have seen that speaks specifically about ending the Fed and abolishing, let's say on your website regarding inflation, you say stopping inflation at the source by auditing and abolishing the Federal Reserve and allowing legal alternative currencies like gold, silver, Bitcoin, and Monero.
Yeah.
Share a little bit more about your perspective on that. Why is it necessary to end the Federal Reserve?
Well, the Federal Reserve of course, has a money monopoly. And I don't believe in any monopolies. All monopolies are actually extremely bad for people. And so what they have is a monopoly over production of fiat currency. That is currency that has no basis in value. There's nothing of value backing it, only the word of the state. That's it. And they have the ability to produce it out of thin air, as Ron Paul used to say, out of thin air. They're making it out of nothing, then loaning it to the state on interest. So imagine if you could create a completely imaginary product and sell it and loan it to people with interest. It's incredible. It is the biggest scam ever perpetrated. And then they create economic problems. They create the boom-bust cycle. They create inflation. So what I say is that short of getting rid of it, which would take an act of Congress and the Senate, we need to practice. And first of all, we need to get rid of legal tender law so that other currencies become legal. And then we can undermine the power of the Fed to be as a money monopolist by virtue of having real competitive currencies in the marketplace. So if people, a community, a network want to use Bitcoin, they should be legally able to do so. Things like that.
You talk about there's the Great Reset, but you talk about the Great Refusal, which is, I think, brilliant. You talk about how globalists rely on the consent of the exploited. First and foremost, people need to wake up and realize that they are being exploited. But you have a 9-point plan for stopping the Great Reset.
Yeah.
One of which is refusing the central bank digital currency. Why is that necessary?
Well, the central bank digital currency is like, we got to get out ahead of this. It's the next wave of totalitarian control that's being posited as some benefit to us. It'll be a total nightmare. It will take away your financial freedom entirely. Basically, you have an account with the Fed, which will be transparent to them, and they could control spending, what you can sell, what you can buy. They'll have a complete surveillance over your financial transactions, and they can flood the market digitally with CBDCs by putting some here, some there to favored players, which they do anyway now, but real instantaneously. They could flood markets, they could deprive markets, they could totally distort the marketplace altogether and create the kind of market they want, and to the benefit of them and their accomplices. So that's a terrible prospect. And so we need to make sure we don't buy into it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yep. Speaking of not buying into things, your second point here is rejecting Internet of Bodies technologies, the installation of devices in your body, the metaverse, and transhumanism. That is so scary, and again, still not really on people's radar yet.
No. I'm
the
trying to,
listener
yeah,
understand.
and those points, I'm getting ahead of some of the things that they're trying to do. The Internet of Bodies is simply a data tagging of basically your organs and organ systems, and this would datify your entire organic processes and make it available to central databases. It also could involve that main organ, I think, the brain, and in which case they could actually install, and this is very, look, Neuralink, Musk, for all his good points, put it that way, also has this Neuralink project, which is called brain computer interfacing. The next step up from brain computer interfacing is brain cloud interfacing, where your brain is effectively on the cloud. And this would make inputs and outputs into your brain possible. So you'll be putting out things that would go onto the cloud, and they could have cloud originating. The cloud could have impact on actually what goes into your brain. So this could control behavior to an unprecedented degree and actually undermine even the idea of free will. Noah Yuval Harari has said that free will is over. He's a consultant basically with the World Economic Forum. And he said, humanity is hackable. We can hack you, and we could control you through this. So it's kind of like a remote control system that could be possible. So all these things sound crazy, but so if we looked at what's happening today, if we try to anticipate them 20 years ago, we say, oh, that's crazy. That ain't gonna happen.
Yeah.
But, and then there's some other things in there. Yeah, digital identity, which, is a database about you that's connected to the CBDC, that's actually, according to the Bank of International Settlements, necessary for instituting the CBDC. That has to be resisted too, because that's a complete record of all your behavior from cradle to grave, at least for newborns, and from the point of introduction on everybody, including things like your vaccine status, you could include a social credit score, an ESG score, and so on and so forth.
As we're winding down on time a little bit here, I think it's important for sure for people to have the great refusal. We need to not consent to the globalist agenda. On the other hand, what are we pointing towards? What is the alternative target? Can you please paint a picture of what a Rectenwald version of that target looks like?
Yeah. Okay, so as opposed to what they want to do was total control and centralized power and centralized knowledge, I believe in distributed knowledge and distributed power, distributed economics. So I think a distributist idea where you have more like nodes of production and kind of like cottage industries now, high-tech, digitalized, and blockchain sort of cottage industries, all producing things without central control imposed on them, without this kind of surveillance system, basically a grid that's not overseen by like a master hand, or by a master eye, if you will. So we would incorporate technologies into this, but they wouldn't be used as they are being proposed to be used by these techno-tyrannists. They were looking at techno-tyranny. They look at all these technologies as a way to get absolute like power over everything in the world. Whereas I'm saying the technology can be used to liberate us from their oversight and their control. So I look at it, I'm looking at distribution, decentralization, localization, and a voluntary society where everything is voluntary. There isn't any compelled production. There's no compelled consumption. There's no, restrictions on all these things imposed by the regime as such. That's the vision I see. And I think getting them out of the picture, getting the state out of, removed at least from the pictures, pushing it back would give us more wealth and freedom at the same time. We would have comparatively a kind of cornucopia, not a utopia. There's nothing utopian about freedom, but it's definitely much more conducive to creating wealth and prosperity for the vast majority and increasing real social welfare as opposed to government and dictated or distributed social welfare.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Wired for Impact. If you're interested in creating and expanding your impact, be sure to visit us online at impactnow.com.